I asked Claude to read would you read the NIV version? And then anybody else who has a different translation, please get ready to read that too. Goody?
Yes. We're reading the parable of the 10 virgins, which is at Matthew 25. At that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. The foolish ones took their lamps but did not take any oil with them. The wise, however, took oil in jars along with their lamps. The bridegroom was a long time in coming, and they all became drowsy and fell asleep. At midnight, the cry rang out, "Here's the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all the virgins woke up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish ones said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, our lamps are going out." "No," they replied, "there may not be enough for both us and you. Instead, go to those who sell oil and buy some for yourselves." But while they were on their way to buy the oil, the bridegroom arrived. The virgins who were ready went in with him to the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later, the others also came. "Sir, sir," they said, "open the door for us." But he replied, "I tell you the truth, I do not know you. Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour."
That's the NIV version. Does anybody have another translation at the ready?
I have question. Sent out.
Quick question. Where is it in Matthew?
It's
Matthew 25.
Okay, thank you.
And
I
the
see
one
it. Okay.
sent out by Nancy Purcell this morning in the Grateful Gatherings email is from the NRSV.
So Michael, do you want to read the NRSV version if it's handy?
Then the kingdom of heaven shall be compared to 10 maidens who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. For when the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them, but the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, they all slumbered and slept. But at midnight there was a cry, "Behold the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all those maidens rose and trimmed their lamps. And the foolish said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out." But the wise replied, "Perhaps there will not be enough for us and for you. Go rather to the dealers and buy for yourselves." And while they went to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the marriage feast, and the door was shut. Afterward, the other maidens came also, saying, "Lord, Lord, open to us." But he replied, "Truly I say to you, I do not know you. Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour."
Thank you. There are several faces here tonight. Come on in.
Hello.
Hi. Somebody lurking in the doorway.
That was Lisa.
Who?
Lisa.
Oh, that's right. There are several faces here tonight who were here last week, when we talked about the parable of the fig tree. Christopher, you were here. Susan Banks, you were here. Does anybody know where this parable appears in relation to the fig tree? The fig tree parable is the one that says, "Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away."
Okay, folks, here you're going to see something on the screen in just a second. Hang on, I'll be right back with you.
Hello, John.
He's here.
Put your sound on.
Okay.
All
All
right.
right.
Well, in case nobody has put
I'm
it together.
going to share the screen, and the fig tree, in Matthew, it was in chapter 24, verses 32 to 36. It also appeared in Mark and Luke.
Well, we were looking, my recollection is we were looking at Matthew, and this parable comes pretty much slam bang after the fig tree.
Correct.
So it's in that chapter where everything was happening. Sorry, let me grab my Bible. It's in that chapter where everything was happening, which in my Bible is headed up signs of the end of the age. So that gives kind of a context for what's going on here.
Mhm.
The NIV says the kingdom of heaven will be like these gals. And the Message says God's kingdom is like 10 young versions. So the first question, and if I don't get any learned responses, I'm not above calling on people. So here's the first question. Does it make a lick of difference to the story whether these are virgins, young virgins, women, bridesmaids, etc.?
No, I don't think so. It just indicates that they were young and innocent. And perhaps some of them were more mature than others, because some of them just didn't have very good judgment. I don't know.
Anybody think it's important?
And actually, building on what Barbara said, it's probably more significant. She said they didn't have very good judgment. It's probably more significant that some were foolish and others were wise, as opposed to what name they went by, whether it be bridesmaids or maidens or virgins.
Well, unless there's a tremendous focus on the idea of the marriage feast, which is a big biblical, theological thing, I'm sure, it doesn't seem to me to make any difference what they're called. They were young folks who were, well, we think they're young.
They're single women, I gather.
I'm sorry?
They're single women.
Single women, yeah, okay. Okay, single women on their way to some sort of event. And I thought before we took up any allegories or any metaphors or anything like that, we would just look at the story. So, on the simplest level, what's going on here? Just story-wise. If this were a movie, what would we be looking at?
Well, it seems to be the moral of the story is be prepared. Just,
well, we're going to do the moral of the story, but right now we're just looking at the words of this story. You know, here they are.
mm-hmm.
And 10 lamps. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Some people are ready and others are unprepared. And we are going to track what happens to the two groups.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I also note that the bridegroom is late. Shame on him. Sorry.
And what's that all about? I think we're probably about to dive in at the deep end of the pool here, but the bridegroom is late. And I wonder if that has anything to do with the fact that about the time this was written, I think, there were people who were wondering why Jesus had not come back and why the second coming had not second come. Does anybody see a connection there?
Hmm.
I don't know. You know, I'm not
Bonnie?
I guess so, yeah.
to me, naivety comes to mind, being naive. And maybe it's my personal experience, but I think it's a lot to do with, you know, you never, once again, I'm not trying to get into the totalness of it, but if you're either, once it goes by, you can't, it's like, it's done. You can't, and when you're new to it, you're coming new, being virgins, if you will, you don't have the knowledge to understand that it goes by once, and you have to, like she said, be prepared, but it's coming. All that know the kingdom knows it's coming. So it's like death to me. He's trying to tell you that, you know, when it comes, I'll come in the middle of the night. You won't know it's coming. I'll come, and by then, if you haven't got it, it's too late. As a young person, maybe virgins are young, you know about things, but you don't know everything. And sometimes you don't put it all in context, you know, to the whole message. So that's kind of the way I see it. It's just, it's like death. It's like a death thing. When I'm coming, one chance, I'm letting you know I'm coming. I've come. You missed it, and you can't back up. Going by.
Yep. Then following up on that, you're not sure when he's coming. I mean,
Never.
they thought they were when he was coming at a certain hour, but he turned up late and gives them an opportunity to fall asleep, of course, and that was their downfall.
Yeah. Well, once again, I don't want naive. Is naivety a word? I know naive, but you know what I'm trying to say. I don't.
Chris, you're gonna have to speak up because I'm not hearing you all that well.
Is naivety a word? Being naive, how would I, will be the right answer? Anyway, being naive is kind of a trait of the young. Even Einstein says, you know, everybody's naive in some area. And so when you're talking about kingdom passing you by, a lot of people know all about it, but they're not really grasping the whole context of when it marches by you, it has marched by you. It's gone. And they've locked the doors and you can't get in, and you weren't prepared, although you knew it was coming. You just weren't prepared for the end time, the death, or the procession, if you like, of Jesus coming by, and get in line, you know, be ready. Don't fall asleep, be prepared.
It seems to me that it speaks to faith, whereas whether you, you know, the women that brought the oil, they were there, they knew it was going to happen, they had faith it was going to happen, and they were prepared to stay the course and be there when it happened. It seems to me the other five, they were not as plugged in to what the bigger picture of what was happening. So it speaks to me of faith.
Laura, do you think this is a stay the course a parable?
I think this is an obedience parable, perhaps. I am coming. I will come in like a thief in the night. I will be there. So you be there and be ready. And that's the ask. So anyway, that's my thought.
You guys are all very metaphoric tonight. When I looked at this story, I had a few questions about just the facial story. What the movie would be, a bunch of young ladies going outside to I think we can safely say a wedding feast. And my first question was, if you're going out to meet a bridegroom, why do you have to carry your own lamp? Why didn't the bridegroom light the way?
That's a good question.
My understanding, typically the Mediterranean, especially the Jewish wedding, it would take place at the bride's home, and that would happen. This story takes place after the wedding has been taken place, and traditionally the groom comes back, and that can be at any time. It's well known that they may stay longer or shorter at the bride's parents' home. And so they're coming back. And so the whole story is based upon the unknown. And that is, it's not that the bridegroom was tardy or wrong or anything. That's just the standard operating procedure. The 10 people were not invited to the wedding itself. It was a post-wedding going back to the groom's place. And so my other thought, Christine, is that I think the story to me sounds very legitimate that Yeshua would have told this story. Now, 20, 30 years later, Mark includes it in his, in this case, Matthew includes it in his list of parables. But the story is not just driven by, oh, the kingdom of God hasn't come yet, because I think Yeshua was constantly saying the kingdom is at hand, and we need to be prepared for it. I think the drama, Christine, of the story, if you wanted to portray this out on a movie, is what happens with the wise virgins. They don't share their oil. Tough luck, you didn't prepare. And it wasn't any of this nice sort of wokeness. Oh, why didn't you share your oil with these other people? That's the reality of life. Either you're prepared or you're not prepared. Go to the store and get your own oil. They were fairly harsh with these other virgins, and they weren't their brother's keeper, so to speak, or their sister's keeper. So there's a harsh tone to this, it seems to me, and a lesson. And it's not just when Jesus is coming back. I think the whole thing, Yeshua is constantly talking about the kingdom is going to break in. And we need to, first of all, look for it, and secondly, be prepared for it. I don't know if that helps, Christine, but I agree with you. There is a drama to the story here. And I find a lot of the drama, I guess that's mine.
That's dramatic.
A lot of the drama has to do with why in the world didn't the wise virgins share their oil?
Right. Well, I was chewing on, thank you very much. That's very helpful, because I did not know this is after the wedding. They didn't tell you in the story. I was looking at a few sources today, and one of them was Scott Peck, who was a psychiatrist. And when forced to give a sermon on this parable, he had all of our initial shock about the fact that if the kingdom of God is not about sharing, what is it about? But then he thinks about it and says, there are some things that can't be shared. And preparation is one of them. And I got to thinking about what are some things that you could not share? And the first thing that came to my mind was the driving test. You can't prepare, and you can prepare somebody, but you can't get them through the driving test if they can't drive. There are some things you have to do for yourself. And I thought it might be fun to just get a smattering of other thoughts on things that you can't share. Other than my driving test, what are some things you can't share?
Christine,
Yes.
several years ago, I had a friend, a man I've known for many years, and I convinced him to come to church with me a number of times. And I guess I'm not a really good evangelist, but I was able to share with him some of my outlook and what some of my beliefs are, but a lot of that is quite on a deep level. It's feeling, it's deep psychology and feeling, and some of it I can explain. But here he was coming in with me to the beautiful space of St. John's Cathedral. What a setting, and the liturgy and the readings and the beautiful, wonderful, intelligent sermons and the music that just soars, that feeds the soul. It did nothing for him. He just couldn't get it. You can't share that. You can bring the horse to water, as they say. Just speak to him. You can't share that. You can share your appreciation and wonder at it with other people who also have appreciation and wonder, but yours is not exactly like theirs. It might be similar, but it's all unique. God speaks to each of us as individuals, but some people, they're just, I don't know, rock-headed or I don't know how that, I think one time he said to me, well, that was kind of nice. Gee.
Barbara, you've probably heard this story, but I took the more direct approach with Claude. When we'd gone out about twice, I said, well, you know what? If you were going to keep going together, you're going to have to join the Episcopal Church. A true story.
And here I am.
And there he is. And there he is.
Christine, what occurs to me is that you cannot share sympathy. You can feel sympathy for someone, cannot make someone else feel sympathetic for them. They would have to develop those feelings on their own.
That's right.
Sometimes I think sharing, it often has a lot to do with words. You as being the first person, so to speak. You can't share your salvation. I mean, your personal relationship with God is yours alone, and no one else, even if they have an opinion, is going to alter what that relationship is, because it has to be between you and God. It's no choice. You can share your life with others without what you feel. That's your God daily, and God. So that being said, kind of like the parable, in a very good sense, is about being, one said ready, but then it's also got to do with, what are you going to do? You're going to be ready and follow into the church before the doors are shut, or you're not. But that relationship, to me, also can't really be shared. Relationship is not shareable. Your experiences are, but not the relationship itself.
Well, here's another. Chris, here's another one. Do you guys have a screen? Can you see us at all?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Oh, good. Because we can sort of see you. Okay, so with this kind of harsh story going on, does anybody feel any warm and fuzzies about the God's kingdom or the kingdom of heaven? At that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps. Huh?
God
That's
said,
that's a tough sell.
even Jesus says, I tell you now, the kingdom of heaven is here now. He said it in the gospel several times. The kingdom of heaven is here now. He is the kingdom of heaven come now. It's here today. So it existed. It's not like it's getting prepared. I'm here. The kingdom of heaven is here.
So I think the notion of there being things that you can't share is really helps me understand this story, because there are a lot of things with the people we love and people we want to support that we can't make it happen for them. If you have someone in your family who's an alcoholic, you can't get them to stop drinking. It's not in your power. You try to figure out, what can I do to support this person without enabling them to continue a way that is so destructive. But you can't, but in supporting them, you can't undo what only they can do.
Yes.
And I love that, because that helps explain this so much. I mean, I have one of my children is suffering from mental illness, and I can't make him well. I mean, there's nothing I'd rather do. Nothing I'd like to do more, but it's not in my power. And so I think if we think about that explains these virgins who say you've got to go get your own oil. I mean, it's very similar to how even the people we want to support and that we love the most, we can't do it for them. That makes it a much more palatable with the Christianity that I know than this, well, tough, go do it yourself.
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you for that. That was that's very, very nice and very true. And very Alcoholics Anonymous. As a sometime member, I can say that. Doing it yourself is what that's all about. Nobody can help you. Well, further along the trail, when you go to Elaine Pagel's, who's a lovely Jewish lady, she asks, when is selfishness appropriate and when is it not? And I thought about the standard instruction on an airline when they say, put your own mask on first so that you can help others. When is selfishness appropriate?
By the way, there's a huge difference between selfishness and self-centered, and also self-directed. They all start out the same, but they all have a different connotation for the meaning. I think if you're self-directed, which is looked at as selfish, isn't selfish, it's self-directed. And you can be self-directed on lots of things because it's not inappropriate. You're not really doing it for self. You're just a self-attack. You're just being self-directed as to the need you must comply and do in the world around you. And that's just self-directed. It's not a bad word.
I wonder why the virgins actually didn't say, oh, sure, here, have some. And I wonder why the foolish virgins didn't just barge in the door. As you can see, I'm stuck in the story.
Well, the foolish virgins are still at the market looking for somewhere to buy the oil.
Well, yeah, but the door opened. They went to the 7-Eleven.
Part of that, Christine, might be, you referenced earlier, you said you have this view of who would be cast in the movie, or what would the movie story be about. And now that we're thinking about these fairly young women, you know, maybe they're just mean girls. Maybe that's why they didn't share. You know?
I went to high school with them.
Hey, girl,
I'm sorry.
sugar and spice and everything nice. What do you mean, mean girl?
Have you ever seen that movie?
I missed that.
Oh, boy.
We were talking about selfishness, and I guess, I mean, there would be any number of people who would look at this as extremely selfish. But then, you know, I guess selfishness somewhat depends on your point of view. And I was thinking of when Jesus was calling these disciples, and he took whichever ones out of their boat and left their father, no pun intended, high and dry. And would the father be justified in saying they're selfish? They're going to do something that they want to do, and leaving me here to haul in the fish. That's a, you know, it's maybe selfishness is a relative concept.
Fine.
In this story, what strikes me about them not being willing to share is the fact that if they did share, everybody would run out of oil before they should. That's
It reminds me, as a longtime Californian, it reminds me a lot of the story of the Donner Party, which was stuck in the Sierras in the early settling of California. And a couple of the families had, when they got this early snow in early October, which no one would expect to be the end of their ability to cross the mountain or get out of the mountain. They were pretty much at the top. And they were snowed in for about 5 months or 5 months, very, very bad winter. Some of the families killed their oxen right away, and they were able to freeze the meat in the snow, and they would have enough meat to get them through the winter. But most of the families assumed that this was not going to be a permanent thing, and they needed their oxen to be able to pull their wagons and continue on their journey once this early snow melted. And then it was a big moral dilemma on the part of the families that had the meat, whether they shared or not. And if you know the story, it ended up with cannibalism. They didn't kill people to eat, but as soon as someone died, I don't think they killed anyone.
No, they didn't.
No, but and so the families that kept the meat to themselves, and then some of the others either died of starvation or they resorted to cannibalism. But it's kind of a similar story, dilemma. You know, should they all die in January, or should a small number of them live to get out in the end of March? Kind of question. Because, oh, by the way, the oxen who weren't killed, they went off in disarray and were covered with snow, so they couldn't be. That meat was gone. I'm sorry, that's a very critical part of the story. Oh. So if they didn't kill the oxen at the beginning of the snowstorm, they were gone, and they were not a source of. So anyway, it's a very similar story to this, and it's hard to know what the right answer is.
That's an unnerving story in terms of its relationship to this story. If we're reading this story as be prepared for the judgment day, thinking about the Donner Party is pretty unnerving. Um,
That was a judgment day, all right. But also about the Donner Party, I read a whole book about it. There were children among them. And I'll tell you, as a mother of only one, but as a mother, if it came down to, I need this meat to feed my child is going to come first. I'm sorry for you, but I'm going to make sure my child is provided for. But part of this with the maidens, I think they knew what their role was, and they knew that they should be ready, and they should be there to greet the bridegroom. It used to be in those days the bridegroom was much more important than the bride. You know, we put all our focus on the bride. No, it was like the peacock, you know, with the big. Anyways, the male of the species that got all the attention, and they just didn't want to not do their role, their thing. That's what I think.
Might throw out a point of view that maybe want to consider that if you looked at it like a parade, no matter what about the oil, or no matter what about the door, or no matter what about the whole thing, narrative of the whole story, you know, if you're not there, you missed it. Maybe that's why Jesus said at the other end. They said at the end of the Bible, at the other end, I don't know you, because you weren't there.
Michael, can you get your people to face the mic when they speak?
Please.
It would be very helpful.
You got like a parade, perhaps, you know, it went by you and you didn't have enough oil, so you went and get.
You want to move it to the
No.
person
The
who's
moral of the story is, you know.
Kind of why I put the
you
chairs
missed
away.
it. I came, no matter late or not late, I came, you weren't there. You missed it. So at the other end, he said, you look, I let us in. You weren't there. You weren't there. So, yeah.
Susan Lloyd, are you trying to ask a question?
I'm trying to say something,
Good, that's wonderful. Go ahead.
but what I'm going to say is positive and it's negative. I traveled with a Roman Catholic mentor for quite a few years on trips and so forth. And because my spirituality changed under that teaching, I cannot buy this story. I don't think God closes the door and says, you can't come in. And as he spoke about this, when someone doesn't believe and then on their deathbed, they see God and then they see him, they can't turn away. And God says, come. And that's the God I worship. So
I'm so glad you said that, because I was going to ask if anybody wants to go to a heaven where the host slams the door on some of your friends and won't let people in. That's not a very friendly version of the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of God.
I think that was man's writing down of their understanding of it. And of course, mine is my understanding of it, but I like mine better.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, and not only does he not let them in, he said, I don't even know you.
Right,
But,
right.
you know, you're nothing. And
Disowned.
I think Susan said it a lot better than I could have, but the same thing concerned me is, you know, this is, if you take this sort of at face value, you're saying, you know, you're not going to make it. You know, something's going to happen. You're going to go to hell, or, you know, whatever happens to people who God doesn't accept. And that's not my understanding of the way we believe either.
Right.
I don't know that it's God not accepting them as much as it was them not doing their part.
Oh, well.
They
for
banged
sure.
on the door. They said, sir, open the door for us.
Well, well, I agree with Bonnie's point too. We're not supposed to be just sitting around and, you know, doing whatever we want and then say, oh, it's time for the judgment. I'm in for sure. You know, that's, and to that extent, this makes sense. But it's sort of the literalness of what he seems to be saying here that is troublesome.
But
Susan,
we don't know what eternity offers. These people may have opportunity to grow in eternity as they walk into fellowship with God.
Susan, before you made your very well stated opinion about this, you said that you have something that was both positive and negative, but I don't understand what in what you said you thought might be negative.
What's negative is I don't agree with the parable.
Oh, that's fine.
You know, when I hear these comments, I know that what we try to do is take a parable at a time, and that a lot of, in my thoughts about my concept.
Oh, Christine.
It's different. I can't just take a parable or I take a phrase out of Mark or take it out of well, that applies. But there's other parables in the stories in the Bible that refer to, like, well, I believe his name is Lazarus, the beggar from the guy's house and had a lot of brothers, and he died and went to hell, and he says, gee, I wish Lazarus would touch my tongue and he dropped the water. He went to heaven, and Lazarus was nothing, and he went to heaven. Well, that was another story that says it's too late. He said, well, let me go to my brothers and tell them. He said, no, you can't cross back over. It's done. So, you know, but if we try to break this down, I agree with you, what you said. I love it, what you said, and totally agree. But there are certain things that are just absolute in the Bible, or a lot of people would rather be poetic. A lot of people topic about it. But there are certain things, we're not trying to be legalistic here, there are certain things that are just dead off. And I think that readiness is part of it. And I like the other story. It's just part of it. And there's a phrase that it annoys me sometimes, to tell you the truth, but that's my cross. But it bewilders me at times because people can pick this and say, well, that applies, or I can say, you know, I can get the Bible and go, you know, the Old Testament drives me crazy. People come in and wiping out the whole town and the whole city, and and everything. I'm trying to find the rightness in that, you know, and the Word of God. I get that. So I just have to accept it that certain things are just what they are, without, you know, poetic license or whatever.
There's a time in my testimony that I was very confident. I just went in, I was like, okay, well, this could be true. So, you know, it's the whole fire insurance thing. It's like, okay, I'll buy in because it might be true. And I walked with that for quite a little while thinking, okay, you know, if it's malarkey, whatever, if it's true, I'm in. And then at some point along the way, God got a hold of me, and it is a very different experience to have true faith and a true relationship than to be along for the ride. And like, so I see the unprepared virgins as they're along for the ride, they're doing what the other people are doing. The prepared virgins were they were in for reals. And the fact that they knocked on the door and they couldn't get in, like Susan is saying, that may or may not be the last opportunity for them. They weren't smited and struck down and become, you know, dust. This might have been a time in their life that they go, oh, wait, there's something more to this than just walking along with the crowd. So that's my input.
Continuing with the theme of individual decisions, of either we're prepared or not prepared. It's interesting that Matthew adds right after this story the parable of the talents, where the master gives so many talents, 5 talents to one, 2 to another, and to another he gives only 1. And of course, it's the story of what do you do with the talents that are given to you? And the one, of course, says, "Oh, I just I wanted to put it under my mattress. I didn't want to make anything of the talents that are given to you." And once again, that parable is ended with a fairly harsh statement of the person who didn't use, in this case, his God-given talents. So what's interesting is these are a series of individual decisions. This is a gross oversimplification, but I think there's a tendency, we Christians, sort of as though there's not a shaded difference between the Old Covenant and the New Covenant. And we read the Old Testament and we read the Psalms, and as though it's all one big happy theological family. And I don't want what I'm saying to be taken as anti-Semitic, but Yeshua made some very distinct separations from the prevailing mindset of the day. And I think one of them was what you do individually before God, the decision you do individually. A lot of the salvation in the Old Testament was saving me from my enemies and saving the nation of Israel and Judah and pulling us out of Babylonian captivity. It was a collective concept. Yeshua, in my view, injected, and Christianity emphasizes, we each stand alone and accountable alone before God. Now, the Apostle Paul, and being Lutheran in background, and of course I have to lift up Romans and Ephesians, that we don't do it on our own. That is, a gift of grace of God enables us to bask in the grace of salvation. So we really didn't prepare ourselves for the final salvation. That is a gift of God. And the Apostle Paul in Romans and Ephesians especially drives that point home.
Oh,
Is that mine? I hope that didn't end discussion.
that's for being.
We're thinking about what you said.
You slammed the door.
I'm sorry about that.
No, you're good. With salvation, like I was saying earlier, that salvation is a gift of God, and I won't get into that theology. I believe that you can't. I've always believed that you have to learn to receive before you ever understand giving. In other words, if we can't receive the love and salvation that God gives us as a gift, then we'll never accept. And many people don't ever all their whole lives. But as you were saying, and I'm trying to comment, that we have to seek our own.
Looks like
Susan,
Susan, unmute.
unmute.
I love you guys. I'm sorry, but I have to leave. I'll get up with Laura and see how you ended it. Bye, you guys.
Thank
Bye.
you so much for coming.
Oh, thank you.
Well, what you said, John, is certainly what distinguishes many denominations from the others, whether you get there through works or through grace. And this, at least this parable, seems to be saying you got to do something. that you're not just gonna show up at the door and say, here I am. And you know, it's just interesting. We've really gotten into this much deeper than I realized was in this. It's wonderful.
So we're coming to the end of our time, and Christine, was there any points that you wanted to make sure that we considered before we wrap up?
Well, Bonnie left. I had one for the musicians. A point, keep watch, because you don't know, wake up. One of Bach's most famous tunes is Sleeper's Wake, or Night is Flying. And John, you can probably render that in classical German. Wachet auf something.
Right.
Well, why don't we close with a thanks to Michael for getting this together and for getting the sound quality improved greatly. And also maybe a quick prayer. We're going to close at 7:15, I guess, and it's 7:14 by my clock. So let us pray an evening prayer here. And this is from the New Zealand Prayer Book. Dear God, thank you for all that is good, for our creation and our humanity, for the stewardship you have given us of this planet Earth, for the gifts of life and of one another, for your love which is unbounded and eternal. O thou most holy and beloved, my companion, my guide upon the way, my bright evening star. Amen.
Amen. Good night, all.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Next week, we
Christine.
have Lazarus and the Rich Man, and Jerry Kelly, who's in the EFM cohort, led by Jay Wright, is our discussion leader next week.
Good.
I look forward to seeing
Look forward.
some of you online. And some of you here
Look
in-
forward to it.
Thank you all for coming.